She came to deliver gifts, simple, carefully wrapped offerings meant for a noble household. But within minutes, the Duke's mother would command her to pretend love for a man she had never met, and that single order would drag her into a world where every glance was watched, every word measured, and every heartbeat dangerously real. The morning had begun like any other for Elara Whitmore, with frost clinging to the edges of her workshop windows and the faint scent of dried lavender lingering in the air as she tied the final ribbon around a basket of preserves and hand-sewn linens, her fingers moving with quiet precision born of necessity rather than leisure, because every item she crafted carried the weight of her family's survival. Every stitch and jar a promise that her younger siblings would eat and that the rent would be paid for one more month. And so when the order came from Blackthorn Manor, the grandest estate in the region, whispered about with equal parts awe and intimidation, she had not hesitated despite the unease that curled in her stomach, because wealth like that did not notice girls like her unless something unusual was about to happen. The journey to the manor was long enough for her thoughts to wander, but not long enough to calm them. And when the towering iron gates finally came into view, framed by stone pillars carved with the Blackthorn crest, Elara felt that familiar shift inside herself, the quiet lowering of her presence, the instinctive understanding that she was stepping into a world where she did not belong and must therefore tread carefully, speak little, and leave no impression. Yet even as she guided her cart toward the servants' entrance, she could not help but notice the sheer scale of the estate, the way the windows gleamed like polished mirrors, the gardens trimmed with almost unnatural perfection, and the faint echo of distant voices that carried the unmistakable tone of people accustomed to being obeyed. And it was in that moment, as she handed off her delivery note and followed a silent footman through corridors lined with paintings worth more than everything she owned combined, that she reminded herself of her purpose: deliver the gifts, collect the payment, and leave without incident. But fate, as she would soon learn, had already rewritten her role in a story she had never agreed to join. The hallway opened briefly into a grand space flooded with light, and Elara caught only a fleeting glimpse of polished marble floors and a sweeping staircase before she was directed toward a smaller receiving room. Yet even that room bore the unmistakable mark of excess, with silk drapes and gilded accents that made her carefully arranged baskets seem almost humble by comparison, though she took pride in them nonetheless, adjusting a ribbon here, straightening a folded cloth there, because her work was the one thing she could control, the one place where effort still translated into worth, and she was just about to step back, to declare the delivery complete, and slip quietly away, when the sound of heels, sharp, deliberate, and entirely out of place in a servant's corridor, echoed behind her, causing her spine to stiffen instinctively as a voice, cool and commanding, cut through the air with effortless authority. That one, it said, and though Elara could not yet see the speaker, she knew immediately that this was someone accustomed to being obeyed without question, someone whose attention was not easily dismissed, and she considered, briefly, pretending not to hear, pretending to be invisible as she had always done. But something in that tone made it clear that invisibility was no longer an option, and so she turned slowly, her hands still faintly dusted with dried petals, to face a woman whose presence seemed to dominate the entire room, the Duchess of Blackthorn herself, dressed in deep emerald silk that shimmered with every slight movement, her silver-streaked hair arranged flawlessly, her gaze sharp enough to dissect truth from pretense in a single glance, and for a moment neither of them spoke, the silence stretching just long enough for Elara to feel the weight of being seen in a way she never had before, not as a servant or a delivery girl, but as something being assessed, measured, considered. And then, without preamble, the Duchess stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly as they took in every detail from Elara's worn boots to the steady set of her shoulders. "You're not afraid," she observed, her tone almost curious, and Elara, caught between honesty and caution, answered simply, "I've learned not to show it, Your Grace," which earned her the faintest curve of a smile, not warm but approving in a way that sent an unexpected chill down her spine. And before she could question what that meant, the Duchess reached out, not roughly, but with unmistakable intent, and took hold of her wrist, turning it slightly as if inspecting not just the calluses there but the life that had formed them. Good, she said quietly. I have no use for girls who tremble. And then, releasing her just as suddenly, she gestured toward the doorway leading to the grand hall, her expression sharpening into something almost decisive. Come with me, she ordered, and Elara hesitated, every instinct telling her that stepping through that door would change something irrevocably, that whatever lay beyond was not part of her world and never would be. But the memory of unpaid bills and her brother's worn shoes pressed against her hesitation, and so she followed, her heart beating just a little faster with each step, until the door swung open and the full weight of Blackthorn society revealed itself before her. Nobles gathered in elegant clusters, their conversations pausing mid-sentence as they turned toward the unexpected intrusion, their gazes settling on Elara with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. And at the far end of the hall stood a man who could only be the Duke, tall and composed, his dark hair slightly disordered, as though he had only just arrived, his expression unreadable until his eyes met hers and sharpened with immediate suspicion. And in that suspended moment, before he could speak, before she could retreat, the Duchess stepped forward with a confidence that brooked no interruption and announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room, "Everyone, allow me to present the solution to our little problem." And then, turning to Elara with a look that was both expectant and utterly uncompromising, she delivered the command that would unravel everything Elara thought she understood about her life. Act like you love him. The Duchess's command, act like you love him, hung in the air like a sentence already passed, and Elara knew in that instant there was no graceful escape, no quiet retreat back to her simple life, because the entire room was watching, waiting for her to either confirm or shatter the illusion. So she stepped forward on instinct alone, closing the distance between herself and the Duke with a steadiness she did not feel, her hand lifting to rest lightly against his arm as though it belonged there. And for a heartbeat he remained still, his sharp gaze locked onto hers with a mix of suspicion and disbelief, as if measuring whether she was a fool or something far more dangerous, before his fingers closed around hers, firm enough to anchor the moment. "You're late," he murmured under his breath, the words carrying just enough intimacy to satisfy the watching crowd. And Elara, catching the rhythm of the lie, answered quietly, "You didn't tell me I'd have an audience," which earned the faintest shift in his expression, something almost like reluctant approval, and when he turned to face the room, his posture changed seamlessly into that of a man entirely in control. "My apologies," he said smoothly. "My fiancé has had a long journey." The words sent whispers rippling through the hall, and Elara felt them like a physical force pressing in from all sides. Yet she held her place, forcing herself to lean just enough into him, to let the illusion breathe, because breaking now would mean humiliation neither of them could contain. And so the performance continued, stretching into a series of introductions, polite conversations, and careful observations, each moment a test she had never prepared for, yet somehow endured, guided subtly by the Duke's quiet corrections and steady presence, until at last the crowd began to thin and the weight of their scrutiny lifted just enough for her to pull her hand free and turn to him, her composure cracking. "End this," she said, under her breath. "Tell them the truth before it goes any further." But his jaw tightened, frustration flickering through his otherwise controlled demeanor. "You think I wouldn't if I could," he replied, running a hand through his hair in a rare show of agitation. "My mother has made that impossible." "Impossible?" Elara echoed, her disbelief sharpening. "You are a duke, and she is my mother," he shot back, though before the argument could escalate, the Duchess's voice cut cleanly through the tension, calm and precise as ever. "If you end this now," she said, stepping forward, "you confirm every doubt already forming in that room, that you were deceived, that your judgment is weak, that your position can be undermined." Adrian stilled at that, the weight of her words settling heavily, and Elara felt a cold realization take root. This was not just a ridiculous charade, but something far more dangerous, something tied to reputation and power in ways she barely understood. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly, meeting the Duchess's gaze despite the unease coiling in her chest. 3 months, the Duchess replied without hesitation. "You will remain here as his fiancée, attend the necessary events, and make society believe what they saw tonight is real. Elara's breath caught, the enormity of it pressing in. And if I refuse? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Then you leave with nothing, came the calm reply. And your family returns to the uncertainty you've been trying so hard to escape. The word struck too close to ignore, and Elara hated how easily her circumstances had been laid bare. Yet she could not deny their truth, and when she looked at Adrian, expecting dismissal, she found something else. Conflict, sharp and unguarded, as though he too recognized the unfairness but saw no simple way out. You don't have to agree, he said quietly, his voice softer now, meant only for her. I'll deal with the consequences. But Elara shook her head slowly, the decision forming even as fear pressed against it. No, she said, steadier than she felt. If I walk away now, it ruins us both. The word us lingered between them, unexpected and fragile, and for a moment neither spoke, until she drew in a breath and faced the Duchess once more. 3 months, she said firmly. But when it ends, I leave on my own terms. A faint, satisfied smile touched the Duchess's lips, as though the outcome had never been in doubt, while Adrian studied Elara with a new intensity, something shifting behind his guarded expression, as if realizing that this arrangement, this forced, impossible lie, was already becoming far more real than either of them had intended. The lie was never meant to last, but by the time the truth threatened to destroy everything, Elara realized it had already become something far more dangerous. The whispers turned sharp, accusations spreading through society as people began to question who she really was. And this time the scrutiny was not curious but cruel, meant to expose her as nothing more than a fraud, and unwilling to be the reason Adrian's name was dragged through scandal. She chose to leave, packing quietly before dawn, and slipping toward the gates with a heart heavier than she expected, because somewhere along the way the act had stopped feeling like an act at all. But she didn't make it far, his voice stopping her, low and steady, running away, and when she turned, she saw not the distant Duke, but a man who had shed every layer of pretense. I'm trying to fix this, she said softly, but he shook his head, stepping closer. By leaving? You think this was ever just an act? The question lingered between them, and when she tried to insist he deserved someone more suitable, someone from his world, his answer came without hesitation. I don't want someone from my world. I want you. And the truth in his voice shattered the last of her defenses, because she had chosen him too, long before she admitted it. And this time, instead of stepping away, she stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. Then no more pretending. And when he took her hand, it was no longer for an audience or obligation, but for something real, something chosen. And in the days that followed, the scandal lost its power the moment truth replaced it, until even the Duchess acknowledged what she had set in motion, watching with quiet satisfaction as what began as a forced performance became something undeniable. And later, when Adrian glanced at Elara and asked softly, "Are you still acting?" she smiled and shook her head, because she hadn't come to play a role. She had come to deliver gifts, and somehow, she had found a love that needed no performance at all.